Welcome to part 3 of Business Income, It's Made Easy. Today we're going to talk about rental value insurance. Rental value insurance is actually part of the business income form, and it's going to be activated on the declaration page. So the way the wording works is it says business income is including rental value, business income is other than rental value, or you can just write rental value. So what they're saying there is, let's say I'm an apartment house, and the only kind of income that I make is loss of rents, rental value. Then the only part of that would be activated would be the rental value. But let's say that I have a business and I also receive rents. Now I could do that because I'm leasing out part of a building to somebody, or what you'll see more often happen is that the building is owned in a name different than the actual business is being operated. It might even be in a family trust, for example. So you'll have the business name, you'll have the family trust name on the policy, and you'll activate both business income with the rental value, or you can write business income without rental value, and rental value is a separate item. But one way or the other, you're going to activate both of those coverages in that situation. So business income is defined in a policy, and it's defined in 3 subparts. And each one of these parts brings with it an amount of insurance. So we have to ask the customer about each one of these sections. The first one is the total anticipated rental income from tenant occupancy of that premises. Now what's important is the term anticipated. Because remember, we're always dealing with information when we write this policy that we have gotten from a financial statement that was for that prior year. And one of the questions with rent, of course, is what's the occupancy rate and what's the history of that occupancy rate? But remembering that we're writing this in the event they have a loss during this policy period. So it may very well be that they can prove they're making more rents than they have historically. So why might that be? Well, first of all, it could be a better economy. Secondly, the area might be improving. Third, they might have been renovating the units. And maybe it is that renovation that is the reason that their occupancy rate was so low prior to this loss. So all of this goes into the equation as to how much we should write and also what they might be entitled to. The second subset of rental value is going to be all the expenses that the owner of the building has passed on to the tenant, which now, when there's a loss, is now going to be the responsibility of the owner. So for example, let's say that the owner has passed on the utilities to the tenant. And so now there's a fire and the tenant leaves, and now the owner of the building has to pay those utilities. I think we've heard of the term triple net lease before. And the way to remember this is to remember the acronym TIM, T-I-M. That stands for taxes, insurance, and maintenance. So the landlord has passed the expenses to the tenant while they're occupying, obviously, of paying all the property taxes, providing the insurance, and also paying for the maintenance. When that tenant leaves, then that becomes a financial obligation of the owner of the building, and we can insure for that. The third subset is where the owner of the building is actually occupying part of their building. So let's say I have a 10-story office building, and the owner of the building has a penthouse suite, and now there is a fire to that building. Well, there was a rental value to that penthouse suite, and the insured will respond by paying what the rental value was of the premises that the insured actually operated. So to summarize, this form intends to pay all the loss of rents that they are now incurring because of a covered situation, all expenses that they've passed on to the tenant that now will be their responsibility, and the fair rental value of the unit they may occupy. So, easy, right? So join me next time, session number 4, and we're going to talk about extra expense.
That was easy.